Upon quitting my job, I experienced this break in reality. When everyone in your life is building their life around full-time work, you are suddenly insane. I was a walking trigger once I quit my job. When you trigger other people, it's not their criticism of me, it's their fears. So we need to steal ambition back from the culture. It is not just progressively increasing your income every year. We can reclaim ambition as bringing forth the fire in our soul. I know in my deepest bones in my body, I'm not going back. I'm fighting for this path. All these things, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm 7.5 years in this path. They're all just hypothesis, trying things. But my journey over the last 7.5 years has been reminding myself, oh, I do have that fire inside of me. I actually am driven. I did 350 curiosity conversations from people all around the world. I don't think I realized how many kinds of humans there were. It's far more expansive than you could ever think. Who needs more pathless friends? Find each other, wander. We should just stay here all night.
Welcome to the Commons, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
Super excited to have you. I'm Cissy Hugh. I am the general manager of this space. Our premise is that we're a community living room designed to support our members and guests in self-exploration, growing, and meaning-making. So we think of ourselves as an attempt at what might it look like if we were trying to create a secular church in modern day. For those who are not familiar with Paul's work, I'll give you a quick read on his bio. He's a writer, podcaster, and curious human who left a career in consulting to explore a pathless path of freelancing, writing, and helping others rethink their relationship with work. After quitting his job in 2017, Paul began experimenting with projects that aligned with his curiosity and values, leading to the creation of his book, podcast, and other ventures, mostly failures, his words. He writes about work, life, and living unconventionally, while traveling the world with his wife and now daughter, embracing the unexpected turns in his journey. So, before we get started, we'd love to get a sense of who's in the room. You want to kick it off?
Oh, thank you. Did I write that?
You did.
That's pretty good. Hello, everyone. I am Paul Millard. So I think many of you know me. I'd love to get a pulse of the room. So maybe we can start off with, who does not have a job? These are my people. Okay. Who is on a break from work right now? Okay, awesome. Who is break curious? Break curious. Awesome. Who has read The Pathless Path? Wow, thank you guys. I really appreciate that. Who's read Good Work? Oh, this is good. I'm just gonna say stuff from the book so you won't know. Cool. Well, really excited to be here. And this is the first public event I've done for a book thing. I did a small thing in Austin, mostly with friends a couple months ago. But when I launched The Pathless Path, I was pretty scared to be out there in the world. And this book is really about me actually embracing being bold about putting out what I actually care about. And I just feel very lucky to be in the room tonight. So thank you for hosting this, Cissy.
Cool. We're thrilled to have you. Okay, so there's a couple of folks that might be new to your work, and would love to hear a quick intro from your words of how you arrived where you are today, beyond the bio.
So it was a snowy Wednesday. Lots of snow. Born and raised in Connecticut, and a big part in my journey, I think, was I was raised with parents who did not go to college and always felt ashamed of that. And I think for them, it was very important to go to college and sort of follow what I call the default path. And everyone around me was doing such things, building a life around work. And I was good at it, good at school, good at the work thing, good at getting jobs, good at changing jobs many times. And because of that, I think something I've come to through my writing is realizing I didn't really have an inner game of knowing myself. I imagine a lot of people attracted to this space have gone on different self-growth journeys. And so because of that, I sort of had this growing dissonance in my 20s of succeeding in a life that on paper felt right, but always having this sort of like growing discontent and not knowing what that was all about. 32 years old, I blow up my life, sort of wander for a year and a half. But upon quitting my job, I experienced this like break in reality. I am suddenly a freelance consultant right after being a strategy consultant. And I thought that wouldn't be a big deal. I thought, oh, I'm just gonna do consulting, but as a freelancer. Turns out when everyone in your life is building their life around full-time work, you are suddenly insane to them. And that tension was something that was very intense, very hard, very uncomfortable for me. But it was also something I became curious about. And so for the last 7.5 years, and still, like, I'm just so curious about, like, why is it weird to be on these paths? Like, why is it so hard? Why do people, even if they have the resources to do it, not do it? Why don't we accept this for people in our families, our partners, things like this? And so, yeah, that curiosity has really driven me over the last 7.5 years. I'm sort of going over some things like fell in love, had a baby, had a couple books. So here we are.
Let's jump right into good work. So you share a scene in the book from The Way Home where one of the characters reflects, after you leave home, the old maps, reliable and helpful for so long, no longer work. And we've talked a lot about the fact that both of us, a lot of people in our lives, have inherited these scripts around who we should be and what type of work we should do and what society expects of us. And I think your script was about, I've got to be worthy of respect as a result of doing successful things. And so I'm curious, as you've approached rewriting the scripts of your life, how have you managed all of the shooting from the external world? So from people who are looking at you, who are in the day-to-day doing the traditional path, how have you broken away from that, from the more like psychological and emotional part of the game?
Yeah, so the best hack for that is to find other friends on weird paths. And then suddenly you're not weird, you're just both normally weird. But I would say one of the first things that happened to me after quitting my job was basically feeling like a bad person, like I had done something wrong. And I grew up in New England, where I think the conformism is a little more intense than California. And there's a story in my first book about, I got this idea from Ben Hunt. He's a writer. And he has this idea called the bad egg and the good egg. And the bad egg in an industrial system is the egg that is like too dirty to put on the shelves. But he runs a farm, and the bad eggs are actually the good eggs, right? And so he makes the point of not mistaking the industrially necessary egg. You can't scale the dirty eggs in our modern society, right? And so similar with work, you can't scale the weird paths into a neat economic labor system. And so when I left being somebody that fit into a system to often doing my own thing, I stood out and I sort of felt like the bad egg. And I sort of like embraced that mentality. But to be honest, in 2017, like I really didn't know people doing this. One of the first, I'd met like maybe 3 people in my first year, and I quickly realized, oh, I need to like get space. I need to get distance from my home culture. I need to find the others. And I really prioritize finding the others as sort of like my hack for that early on.
For people who are feeling like they're a bad egg in a good egg society, what would you recommend for finding their others?
Yeah, come to events like this. But who like, genuinely, who feels somewhat like that to at least some people in their life? Maybe your parents, friends. Okay, well, we should just stay here all night.
The room till 10?
I think there are different degrees. I think having that like one really good friend you can talk to about a lot of stuff and consistently. I have probably like 2 or 3 of those people. We have like a group chat and we just like talk about how weird it is, the challenges we're facing, the financial insecurity. I can't actually talk about my financial security with like my parents, for example. My mom's response is like, well, just get a job. and so she can't really understand that like the uncertainty is like a good part of the journey, sort of steering me and keeping me going, and that it's sort of a problem to be solved creatively. So finding those like consistent friends, and then for me, a big part of it was living abroad. I know travel doesn't work for some people, but for some reason it was like a magic psychotechnology. And I think there were two aspects. I think one was just getting physical distance from my home, literally 12 hours away at time distance in Taiwan. And like being in this place where I couldn't speak the language or read the signs, I now probably understand more there. And yeah, I just had this sort of like deepening into slowness, solitude, reflection, contemplation. It was very jarring because that was the first time I ever experienced that in my life. And from that experience, it was like, I need to follow this. This feels like the path to figuring things out.
I think probably many of us can relate to our parents telling us to just find a job. For the people who are founders, I oftentimes hear from my friends that their parents are still asking them 3 raises in when they're going to get a real job. I think oftentimes we can mistaken finding good job as a good job as the portal into finding meaningful work. And in your book, you talk a lot about how actually we've mistaken this fact of finding good work through just a corporate job, building a company. And so I'm curious how your perspective on what good work means today and how it's shifted over the years when you think about where you started, which was having this assumption that like I can only find meaningful work through a place where I'm being employed with a steady paycheck, a place where I can get promotions, to now like writing anywhere and everywhere. How has that evolved for you?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find meaningful work in a job, and like that's not hard to figure out. That's a path. Like the propaganda in the early 2010s around like meaningful work was so strong. Like find a dream job, find your passion, and it was all oriented around like doing it at work. And I think everyone here's been exposed to that, right? So like that's an obvious path. I think for me, like I just kept job hopping after job after job. And I'm like, why can't I just find like the dream job? I really believed like if I just find the one job, then everything will be okay. And then suddenly I'm like not making any money, lost, and don't have a plan. And like, I feel good. And it was very weird because work for me was work that is sort of painful to do. There's some element of sacrifice. Maybe I enjoy parts of it, but you have to sacrifice, right? The saying when I was at work would be like, well, you have to work. What are you supposed to do? And it's just like learned helplessness. And so what I try to do in the second book is like, I want to expand the definition of work to like everything. The first 3 days of this week, I took care of my daughter. I didn't do any work. And it's awesome. It's like what I want to be doing and like spending time. And like I see that as like work worth doing. And I also define it as like something that's light too. Like also writing for me for 5 years, I didn't make any money, but it was work worth doing. And so I just had this sense of like, I want to steer more in the direction of doing work worth doing as far as possible. And as it feels safe, build the capacity to keep doing that. And so what I would do is like find ways to make money where I like wouldn't have to sacrifice myself, but like maybe it's not like my perfect good work, but it sort of funds the bills, keeps the journey going, and like keeps this a never-ending quest to like find this constant connection with work I want to maintain.
In the book, you expand work into 4 different buckets. You've got your good work, your good enough work, your supporting activities, and your bad work. And would love to kind of hear from you what some examples are of each of the buckets. We know writing's your good work. What are some of your other buckets of work that you grapple with?
Yeah, so I think the context for this also is like, okay, good work is like, the way I define good work is a connection, a sense of connection. It feels in alignment with what you are meant to do. It's something that pulls you forward. It's not something you're forced to do. It's not a painful thing. It's like the things you have to do. It's like, oh, I love this so much. You're lost in the moment, right? And so for me, I really want to build a life around this. And so it's a constant journey of like juggling these other things. Because I didn't quit. Like, some people want to become financially independent before they quit. I did not do that. I didn't last long enough. I never worked in tech either. You guys make a lot of money. Yeah, so this idea of good enough work, sort of similar. Shout out to Good Enough Job, Simone's book. But like similar idea where like I'm not holding it seriously. It's good enough in that it's not like running a PMO for a consulting project for a chemicals company in the Midwest. Brutal. But it's like I'm working on this other business. I do training in this business I now call Strategy U. I run an online course. I write like blog articles for it. I do YouTube articles for it. If I had all the money in the world, again, if there are like post-exited founders here who are looking to promote some of my work, I'm happy to take donations. But I'd probably skip that work if I had more resources. But I can't now. So I'm trying to optimize it to be like good enough. And then there's like supporting work. There's a lot of things I enjoy. Things like this. I love this. I love meeting you guys. I love like talking to people, reading my book and engaging with my ideas. Like, it's like, man, I'm so grateful for all of you. Like, this was my solution to like find the others. So thank you. But yeah, things like podcasting, let me explore my curiosity. Podcasting, terrible business. Not a good way to make money. Writing online for years, connecting with people like Cissy and other people. Like, there's a handful of people I've met just through like writing, blog posts, newsletters. It's not like making money, it's like fueling me up. But I have a kid now, and over the last year, as I wrote my second book, I had to drop the ball on a lot of those supporting activities. Stop my podcast, pause my newsletter, stop focusing on trying to make money. Did a couple projects to like fund myself to not worry about money for like 9 months. And just like focused on writing and knowing at the time, like basically my income has dropped this entire year. Basically because I was not focused on making money. But I had this bizarre feeling not bizarre, but like while writing the book, noticing that happening, being like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. This is great. I'm like so happy to see my income dropping. Because it was an affirmation. It wasn't sacrificing money. It was an affirmation of the path I wanted to do. And yeah, for me, finding my way back to that connection with the good work is the center. And the bad work, everyone knows their bad work. Who knows their bad work that they're not meant to be doing, right? Everyone's had that experience, right? And so the hard thing for me is if you're in a job, you can do the work you're like 4 out of 10 motivated by, right? Because you don't want to annoy your colleagues. You want to make your boss happy enough. So you can get that done. When you're working on your own, man, doing a 4 out of 10 excitement project is like moving a boulder up a hill. It's so hard. And so that stuff will just like derail your entire journey.
It's interesting to see how many folks know what their bad work is. How many folks know what their good work is?
Shout out some. Like, what? Quickly, what would it be? Josh, what's your good work?
Throwing parties and making art.
Awesome. Simone, you raise your hand. Well, keep your hands up if you know your good work.
Yeah.
Writing books. Awesome. Some back there. Shout them out. Quick.
Wilderness guiding.
Awesome.
Wilderness guiding.
Yeah. Just shout them out. Shout them out.
Doing some work with
Governments.
government.
Yeah. Different stuff for everyone. So
Cool.
I love it. And so for me, it's also this amorphous thing. Like, I think good work for me is not just writing. It's also a broader like engagement with ideas. And like, I really started to see like being a parent as part of that too. Cause like it it all kind of like feeds into each other.
I think an interesting paradox I often hear from friends is, I know that I don't want to do this job, but I don't know what I would do if I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted. And I think one of the interesting things for me is I spent so much time suppressing a lot of the stuff that was my good work, which was similar to you writing, but it's really clear to me my entire life. Like as a kid, I sat on the playground during recess and wrote. And it's like nobody was watching me writing. All I was doing the thing that I wanted to do as a kid. And I think for most of my life, there was this subconscious belief, well, I can't make money doing this thing, so why would I spend time doing something like writing? And so it's an interesting challenge that a lot of friends, I often hear friends say, like, I have no idea what I would do, but then in the same breath list like 10 meaningful activities that they would do if they had more time. But then they'll say, well, that's not like stuff I'm gonna do and make money, what do I do with that? And so I'm curious, like for folks who feel that way in the audience, what would you advise? They have a sense of what they like to do, spending their time doing, but they don't actually know what their good work is. How would you help them find good work?
Yeah, so the lens I look at that is like, I'm not trying to optimize a work, I'm trying to optimize a life, right? And so the devastating thing for me was realizing that writing was the thing I had to do. Writing is a terrible way to make money. I have had some success with my first book, but even if you look at like the time to money payoff and like over the last 7 to 10 years, it's not gonna afford to live. I'm not gonna be able to afford to live in San Fran. Nobody says San Fran, right? You're correct.
This guy's obviously not from SF.
You correct me. Yeah, so it's about building a life. Any climbers in here or surfers? Yeah, so like climbers and surfers, they have this like deep connection to like something that really matters, something that challenges them, something that pushes them. And like these people become like, they love this. And they then become lunatics and like, I need to build my life around making this possible, right? And so I think what trips up people is a mental frame of like seeing work as like something that must be done for pay in a job. And like, it's really about like protecting the good things in your life. And so for me, when I published my first book, I didn't expect to make any money. My mental model at the time was like, I'm going to keep writing for free for fun as long as possible and fund it other ways. I like had to do it. And like, I just liked how I felt when it was a big part of my time in life. And so that's the lens I have. There are other writers, if you want to like maximize gains and wealth, there are a lot of those people. Just go on like Twitter, there's like get rich people around writing. I don't know how to do that though. Like I'm thinking about building a life, not a work. Does that answer it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think an interesting framing for me has been around writing. What I realized is, to your point about protecting your good work at all costs, is that writing is really not about monetizing for me. It's actually about fueling my energy and dropping into states of flow so that actually I recognize what it feels like to feel deeply engaged with my work. And then I'm off to do my good enough work. So usually like I protect my mornings at all costs and write, whether I'm writing 5 words and it's really hard, or I'm writing 1,000 words and I feel like I'm dropping into flow. Like I block that time to write so that I can know what it feels like to drop into flow day after day. And then, same as you, eventually maybe I will monetize, but there's no reliance on like, this is going to be the thing, because then you end up putting all this financial pressure on something that is like meant to be the thing that helps you find flow and helps you come alive. And it kind of maladapts in a way that you don't necessarily want.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that's happened to me is I write about unconventional paths, and then people with unconventional paths write to me and then share their unconventional paths. And so I'm getting all these data points about how different people live, and it's far more expansive than you could ever think. And most of the people emailing me are outside of the US, which is something that shocked me at first. And so because we have a very prosperous economic system here relative to other countries, a lot of people are taking advantage of that upside. And so there's more of a narrowing, especially in cities like SF, like working seasonally, working contract jobs, working in different countries, working remotely from different places. I remember being in Bali and meeting this Australian person, and he bartends like 6 months and then surfs for 3 months and bartends, and he's just been doing that. And like that, he's like, that's a good life, man. Like, not a good accent, but yeah, and meeting people in Taiwan, working remotely for companies in the US. And this guy would like work for a year and be like, I'm good for like 3 now. Like, they're paying me a very low salary for the US, but this is really good for Taiwan. And different ways of like structuring life like that. And I think the possibilities are expanding. And so trying to figure out what are those possibilities.
On the thread of finances, I think being in SF, we all think about how do we stay in SF. I think most people who live here enjoy it at this point. In the book, you talk about leaving money on the table. And there's many moments since Pathless Path has gotten published that you've decided to leave money on the table in pursuit of time freedom over financial freedom. And I'm curious if you can walk the group through how do you make that calculus when you're thinking through, signing a book deal versus owning Pathless Path, things like that. How have you left money on the table?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I turned down a book deal to sell the rights to Pathless Path after I published it. And like, that to me is more of like a financial decision. I think the upside is bigger if I just own the rights, but people could debate that. I think the more interesting thing is I actually just like all the things I'm doing and like don't see money as a solution to like I don't need money to escape it. And I think I can my wife's just as crazy as me and like really like doesn't worry about money. Like, shouldn't have any money when I met her. So the other side of that as well. But like she just has faith that we'll like figure things out. And so us combined, our only strategy is to like break even. And so we have some investments in retirement. And as long as that grows, like our worst case scenario is, and I've shared all my finances, like you can just look at all the links on my websites and newsletters. But our worst case scenario is having about like 45 to 50 grand a year in retirement. And for us, we're like, yeah, we can figure that out. But that's not going to work for other people. If that's not going to work for you, you got to figure out like what will work for you. And so it all starts with like these more intense figuring out and like actually running the numbers. Who here's like run the numbers on what the life worth living would cost them? Yeah. Who knows how much they'll get from Social Security if they stop making money right now? I mean, who knows if we'll be there? We'll see if the boomers leave us anything. But you can actually log into Social Security site, and like there is a robust social safety net in the U.S. I was also in a low income once and had free healthcare, and so experiencing these things, you log into Social Security and you'll see like how much you get per month. So for me, 5 years ago when I looked, it was like $1,300 a month. And then like with some investments that would grow, it was like, okay, I can get to like 40, 50 grand conservatively a year if I like live to 90 and retire as early as possible. And then like maybe live in other countries. But like actually looking at the numbers, it was like, oh, it's not that crazy. And then after that, I did start making a little more, and then it becomes easier. And then I have all these calculators like, oh, there's more runway, more possibility to like try stuff, go after experiments and things like that. I don't know if that directly answers the money on the table. Read chapter 12. People like that one. But if you just like graphed my future salary, I have the chart in the book. I probably left anywhere between $1 million to $2 million on the table over the last 7 years. And so that would have been horrifying to look at before I quit. But like now it's like, I don't know, whatever. Like I wouldn't trade the moments I've had over the last 7.5 years for that.
I think when we think about making a lot of money, oftentimes we tie that to how ambitious we think somebody is. And we've talked a lot about how we've questioned whether or not we lost our edge when we took the Pathless Path. And as we navigate it, month by month, we're wondering, are we losing our ambition? And this book is all about reclaiming your inner ambition. And so I'm curious, for people who are navigating that path for themselves, how would you recommend them thinking about getting in touch with an ambition that they might have suppressed as a result of looking to external markers as who they should be and how ambitious they should be?
Yeah, so we need to steal ambition back from the culture. It is not just progressively increasing your income every year, right? We can reclaim ambition as like bringing forth the fire in our soul. Who remembers the beginning of their career when like you would do anything to break into the job or career of your dreams? Like you're a force of nature. You are networking with people. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're practicing interviews up late. And that fire was a small flame after 10 years for me. And so my journey over the last 7.5 years has been reminding myself, I do have that fire inside of me. I actually am driven. And I might want to channel that into crafting beautiful sentences. And like, maybe that doesn't make the money that will make my parents proud, but it just feels good. And I was ashamed of actually caring about writing for like 3 or 4 years. And even just like living my life for years after I quit my job, I just saw it as like, oh, I'm lazy, I'm a bum, I'm not making money, I wasted my career. And this was reinforced by people in my life who'd say these things to me. And it was fine. I'm like, I'll just be like a struggling artist and kind of just like bum along. And then I had a friend that said to me, he's like, Paul, you're like one of the most ambitious people I know. This is in my book, chapter 13. And I'm like, nah. I'm like, I'm gonna have a kid next year and I have no idea like what I'm doing. He's like, no, really, like you're really ambitious. And yeah, the word bothered me so much. I wanted to reject it so bad. I'm like, ambition's so dumb. Like I hate the corporate world and the success. And really it was about like, I think we all go through this phase of like rejecting the path we leave behind, being angry about it, and then having to integrate it and come full circle. And so actually accepting ambition through this book is like, hell yeah, I'm gonna write a book, boldly do it. Hell yeah, I'm going to like take care of my daughter 3 days a week and do that ambitiously. Like that is the big, bold life for me. And I might run out of money along the way, but like, let's just see what happens. And that's exciting for me. And I think what surprised me is that it doesn't feel how I always thought ambition was meant to feel. I think we think of ambition as like driving forward, grinding, pushing hard towards something. And I think there's a place for that mode, right? Especially when it's aligned with something you care about. You see that a lot in startups where like people really do care about the stuff and the grinding, you might need to do that. But like my ambition feels really light. It doesn't feel contracting. It feels expansive. It feels very natural. And it took me a while to like notice that different bodily sensation of ambition. And it's like, yeah, I'm like super chill ambitious.
When I asked you what you were ambitious about these days a couple of months ago, you made a comment that that was, I'm raising Michelle. And I thought it was really, really interesting. As someone who grapples with myself, me and my partner think about, oh, when we have kids, we're going to have to become less ambitious. Like we're going to have to focus on raising our family. We got to get everything done before we've had this kid. So then it's like, okay, what can we get done before we start a family? And interestingly, both you and Angie have said that in many ways you've become more ambitious and more at ease and in flow in your life since having Michelle. And so I'd love to hear, maybe we can wrap on this question of how has becoming a father changed your relationship to ambition and good work? And what would you advise the people who are hoping to become parents, but maybe actually really nervous that we're going to lose our edge as a result of having different priorities.
Yeah, so I have a chapter on losing your edge, and I have a chapter about Angie's journey. So if you read any chapter, read chapter 4, because it's partly written by my wife, Angie, and she's just so cool. Like, I have the best wife. And yeah, I think her story really highlights it. I think for her, she was so lost, and it was so hard for her because I had found work I cared about and was really feeling good about it. Even if I wasn't making money or succeeding in any way I could prove to others, she was so lost, really struggled, emigrated to the US with me, really struggled to like learn how to fit in the US and like how to communicate in a business context here. And yeah, she throughout this, she was always writing. And after she had a kid, she sort of realized that she wanted to be the person that would be aligned with what she wanted to say to our daughter. She wanted to live out what she would say to our daughter. And she just became a lot more serious about like trying to find someone. And she basically started like giving a book a shot. And so for the past like year and a half, she's been writing a book like very ambitiously. And that's why I have mostly I've spent more time taking care of my daughter than working for the last year and a half, because for our family to thrive, if Angie can birth her good work into the world, that is the most important thing for us, even though she doesn't generate any money right now. And so, yeah, I mean, having a kid is just like a time challenge. You will have less time, you will become more focused, and I think it injects your life with a seriousness. Parents in here, do you resonate with that? Yeah, it injects you with a seriousness. It's like, I gotta like, this little girl, like, I'm gonna be like her role model, like at least for the first like 10, 12 years, no matter what. Like, I gotta like be legit. But yeah, I think I don't start with the assumption that I can have it all. And I think that's sort of like one of the lies we've been told, is that we can have it all, like 2 thriving careers in a family and thriving family life and thriving personal lives. And like, yeah, we're constantly just juggling those things. And for us, we're willing to sacrifice a lot of like work and career success to like protect our creative work and family.
All right. You want to plug Angie's book real quick?
Yeah, well, it's going to be in Chinese first. It's going to be published in Taiwan. It's going to be called Made in Taiwan. And I'm going to co-write the English translation. I think it's going to be a banger. She's like so much better writer than me.
Cool. All right. Let's open the floor for questions for the next 15, 20 minutes. Alex?
Thanks for the talk, Paul. In the Pathless Path, it sounded like a lot of your talking was about how when you start off and people worry that the Pathless Path will like leave them directionless, and that you found that actually when people do that, they find a lot of creativity and motivation. I recently left my job like 4 weeks ago, and I am finding less of the creativity and motivation and more like, well, there's just this like void in front of me. Like, what do I do with this? I could like watch Netflix. Like, did you experience any of that, or did you get through it, or did you immediately have a passion and direction to go?
Yeah, so you're asking about after leaving a job. I'm repeating the questions because Brian told me to repeat them for the camera. You're asking about after you leave a job, is there sort of a period of feeling lost maybe, or stagnation? And yeah, I would say stagnation and feeling lost was the first 16 months of my journey after quitting my job until I arrived in Taipei and I became more serious about writing. Yeah, and I think for different people, like I think at minimum what I've found, I've talked to probably 100 people who have like taken sabbaticals. Talked to Matt Yao in the back after too. He's written a lot about sabbaticals and coached people on this. I think there's often at minimum a 4-week period of like just sort of feeling lost. I write about it in this book, chapter 3. But yeah, I think that's just very normal. And so don't rush it, especially if you have the privilege of time and space. Just notice what you're feeling. Like, I think the important thing is like noticing the tension of like, why do you have a voice that says you should be doing something, right? And I think with enough time, like things emerge. And it might take a shift in environment. I think that is huge for people. Travel is like a cheat code for people. But yeah, and just I would try to meet other people on sabbaticals or taking sabbaticals because like that phase is so common.
I'll add that when I first took my sabbatical, I surrounded myself with thinkers and authors that were writing about, so that's actually when I read Paul's book, Pathless Path. I read How Will You Measure Your Life? And I was just deep in the question of like convincing myself that this was the right thing to do. Like I knew when I had left that it was the right thing, but it took a while to convince myself after that to like not crawl up in a ball and die. And so a lot of it was like surrounding myself with thinkers who had made just as hard of decisions, if not harder, and contemplated the same questions, and then did a lot of inner work, meditation retreats, and yeah, all different types of retreats and self-expressing. I think for me, that's when I really started writing and actually getting, actually spending time sharing my story, even though I had like maybe 50 subscribers, all who were friends that probably didn't read my newsletter at the time. But I was like, I'm just gonna write and express. And it really doesn't matter that no one reads it because I now go back and read it. And so I have like just a catalog and, you know, it might not be writing for you, but it could be any form of self-expression of like putting your heart and soul out there to say like, you're leaving a mark and for future you to come back and be like, damn, I did the damn thing and it was hard, but having some sort of diary of sorts to catalog that experience.
What did you do as a kid for fun?
Love board games, strategy games.
Yeah, how often do you play board games though?
Quite a bit. I mean, not as
Nice.
but quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so like stuff like that is often, is there anything you did like alone as a kid? Live coaching.
Nothing that. No, not really. I mean, it did involve like other people quite a bit.
Nice.
But it's like nerdy, like, you know, like board games are like nerdy interpersonal stuff, you know.
Yeah, so often like there's something in childhood that like people did and maybe you just have to think, but I call these like forgotten hobbies. And try to remember those and then just like go do it. So one of the things I'll do is go play basketball. I used to love playing basketball and shooting in the driveway. And so whenever I'm feeling like a bit disconnected from like my inner child or like that creative flow, I'll go just play basketball in the middle of the day and just like try to have that joyous childhood, like I'm gonna make the NBA one day energy. Yeah, but
Good luck.
rooting for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your views on coaching and like your personal experience with it, if any, with doing it for others or having your own? Or
I did a little coaching before I quit my job. I had a thing called Careers with Paul, and that was sort of like just me dabbling this side emergent energy that was coming up outside of my job. That was really cool to like channel some of this like desire for a different life. Ultimately, I don't think I'm a big coach. I also don't really hire coaches. I'll hire coaches for like more tactical, technical stuff. But I am very much somebody that like loves to read books and apply things in my own terms. So for me, my coaches are authors. Like when I was like David White is like my mentor. And I just reread his books when I feel lost. And yeah, when I was in Taiwan, like Field Guide of Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit, that just like called to my soul. It was just like so nice. Vagabonding, another great book I loved. Yeah.
One of the benefits of coaching that I'll say is that if you have your own coach, the ability for them to clearly mirror to you if you feel like you don't have other hype people in your life is, I think, critically important if you feel like you're like in the hole of not seeing your potential. I think oftentimes coaches can provide that clear mirror just to say like you have all of this potential, and sometimes all you need is like somebody to see you clearly for once a week and reflect that back to you. And so I do think if you're able to find the right coach and they like truly understand you, it actually, you know, can accelerate you in ways that maybe if you don't have people around you to do it, that could be a beneficial part of engaging with somebody who really gets you.
Yeah, I actually realized you saying that. I hired a coach 2 years before I quit my job in 2015. And I think what attracted me to this person is he felt fully alive. And I was so drawn to that. But yeah, as you said that, having him, he was such a believer in me. And it was very jarring because like I was just around critics at work. Like in consulting, you're just like constantly being criticized, and like I had a really aggressive partner I was working with, like just gaslighting me, and like he's like, "You're amazing, Paul." And I kept noticing like, oh, I'm waiting for him to like point out why I can't do things, but he just kept believing in me. And that was just really nice.
Yeah.
Did it also make you uncomfortable? And like,
Yeah, it was scary. I didn't leave my job for another year and a half. He's like, he would say these things like, "You're gonna do amazing things. Like, I really believe in where you're headed." And like, it didn't make sense to me. So yeah, I'm rooting for you too. I believe in you.
nice. Cool, thanks.
Did you ever face like envy once you moved into the Pathless Path, either from people in the default path or post, like the sense of comparison and just like that? Envy is a heavy word, but like some sort of.
Yeah, there are a lot of complex emotions you grapple with when you're on a weird path. What I didn't realize is I was a walking trigger once I quit my job for other people's insecurities about work. Like work goes so deep. Like work is like moral beliefs, moral judgments, self-worth, self-belief, self-criticism, how we value people. And if somebody goes through their whole life thinking that like I'm a good person because I have a job, and suddenly you don't have a job, they will have to criticize you to keep their narrative alive, right? And like I felt so attacked the first year. I'd be like, it's not crazy what I'm doing, and like I developed some emotional awareness of like, oh, this is not about me. So I wrote this essay like, your insecurities, not mine. And it's basically me talking myself into this. It's like, oh, when you trigger other people, it's not their criticism of me, it's their fears. Right? They're mapping them onto my life of what they assume is dangerous about my path, right? Yeah, and then like creating in public, you do attract weird reactions from people. Some people map certain identities on you, certain backgrounds, certain beliefs you have. And yeah, having a public audience and sharing ideas online, you get to see the full range of human hallucinations, which is weird and amazing, but also helps you, it gives you compassion for people, I think, because like, so I did 350 curiosity conversations from people all around the world, like 45 different countries, before I wrote my first book. I just have an open calendar every Wednesday. And I don't think I realized how many kinds of humans there were until that. Just meeting people from different countries, the different work scripts people grew up with, the different goals, the different family situations. Like there's so many ways to see a life and live a life. And yeah, it's been fascinating. It's a bit of a tangent, but.
One of the things I think is deeply important when you diverge from a more traditional path is finding the people that will be your hype people no matter what. So whether it is a coach or friends, because I think ultimately when you diverge, you will look for security and safety because you're doing something that's deeply terrifying. And so if you end up going to friends who will judge the shit out of you, you are going to probably collapse into yourself.
Yeah.
And so for me, I prioritized only telling friends that I knew were like, you're amazing, you're gonna do amazing things. And I told, the friends who were like way more traditional, I'd be like, yeah, I'm taking a break. I'd very much temper what I was telling them as to not trigger them, which would then trigger me. And then I would spend time figuring out why I was getting triggered, because I had so many scripts about who I was and who work was to me. So like trying to circle yourself around people that are really your hype people and trying to protect yourself when you're most vulnerable is an important part, I would say, in the first like at least 3, if not like 6 months. Yeah.
I have more of a comment, but that I'd love to hear your thoughts on the comment. But I took a sabbatical last year, and that was a more traditional sabbatical, kind of just taking time to explore, not any particular intentions. And I read The Pathless Path at that point. And then this last year, I got a job that felt aligned at the time. But about 4 weeks ago, I ended up in a no job situation again. So I'm back in this sabbatical moment, and I picked up Good Work. And one thing that I really appreciate about Good Work, one part that you called out, was that at different points, something like finding good work is a journey throughout your entire life. I think sometimes we think like, oh, I'm going to take one sabbatical and I'm going to figure it out and I'll be good to go. And I appreciated that it was kind of like, no, it's a long-term process, and also something that might have worked a year ago, you've got more data points and it doesn't work now. So I appreciate you calling that out, because I think there's like shame around that a little bit of like, oh, why didn't I figure it out? But also to that point, I'd love to hear like more about your thoughts about how it's a continual process and the long-term journey of it all.
Yeah. So my life is radically different right now than it was 3 years ago. When I wrote my first book, I'm living in Taiwan. I had this course that was generating some money. Our rent was under $1,000 a month. Our rent was like anywhere between like $500 and $700 a month. And food's pretty cheap and awesome in Taiwan. And so like I wasn't too worried about money. And so I just write whenever I felt good. Right. Like, oh, I feel inspired Saturday afternoon. You cannot do that with a newborn. I don't know if people have been around newborns, but I had to completely reorient everything. It was really frustrating. The entire year after my daughter was born, like I took like a solid 3-4 months off to be present, but then I was like called to do a little more writing, and I was just taking the same approach. I'll just like write when it feels good. Nap time, and I'm gonna just go to the computer and write. Like it just didn't work. It was like nothing is working. I was so frustrated. And so even though I'm on this like consistent pathless path, like it was such a different experience. It was almost like completely different reality. And for a solid like 6 to 9 months, I just like kept trying stuff. I had to question everything. I was this person that I could just write wherever, I never get distracted. Turns out if you have a super cute daughter, like you will get distracted. So I had to write outside the house. I had to be very disciplined. I had never been disciplined with writing before. I had to drop the ball on a lot of stuff I cared about, like writing my newsletter and things. And like there was a loss with that. And then like also realizing money was going to be an issue and that was going to decline for a bit. And yeah, but it's like, I know in my deepest bones in my body, I'm not going back. Like I'm fighting for this path. And so like, yeah, me and my wife are so committed. Like we're going to make it work. And I think that is one advantage I've had, that I can't really speak to doing this on your own, or if you have a partner that's not fully on board. But like me and my wife are like co-conspirators. We're constantly plotting, imagining new solutions, remixing, like having meetings about how are we going to do this? How does it work? And so, yeah, it's a constant journey. But I love that. Like that is so fun for me. So if you don't like all that, like don't try to talk yourself into saying, I love that. Like try to come up with simpler ways of structuring your life. Think about maybe something more like stable part-time employment that gives you space on the side, and like just be honest about trying to figure it out on what you need.
I think we're really used to thinking about our careers and our progression in life very linearly. So it's like you're very clearly going to get promoted to this next title if you're in a job for a certain amount of time. And I think with this path, a lot of it is experimental. So rather than thinking about like what ladders am I going to climb in this next 2 years, Now I think about it as like, what experiments and what projects am I spinning up to test my hypothesis? And it used to be like, I think for me, so much of the existential dread came from like taking on a job and then being like, 18 months in, like, shit, I thought this was like my life's work. And then the existential dread came from all of the weight I put into this experiment. It was not meant to be the job I was gonna be at for 2 to 10 years. It was meant to be let's see if I like being in this role. And so now for me personally, it's a lot more of like, set the hypothesis up front and be sure that I'm actually running the experiments I need to learn more about myself, and not so much tethered to like, this has got to work out. Because I think the thing that we've learned is like, no matter what experiments you run, you're never gonna know what the outcome is. And so hopefully if you clench less tightly to the outcome, actually like beautiful things can emerge in ways that you would never have even imagined had you like thought, okay, linearly I'm gonna get to this next thing.
Yeah, there's so many things that haven't worked energy-wise or money-wise. So I've tried things that have worked money-wise, but energy-wise were a dead end. Or things that worked money-wise, but were an energy dead end. I think I just said that, but like, or didn't work money-wise, right? And that list is like 25 times longer than the things that, like the 3 or 4 things that have like worked for money and energy. And yeah, I'm like, as I start the next year, I'm thinking about doing some book coaching, leaning further in that. I'm actually working with Julie over here. She's like helping to run some of my corporate training things. And like, that's an experiment. We're trying it for 6 months. I don't know if it'll work. And like, we're gonna like experiment. I'm gonna learn. I know, like all these things, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm 7.5 years in this path. They're all just like hypothesis, trying things, and like keep going, learning, reflecting, and trying to just keep checking in.
Take a couple more. Why don't we take one from this side of the room?
Blue hat. Yeah, you're the blue hat.
Yeah, black, blue, yeah.
Oh, is it black?
You colorblind.
Thanks for your writing. I think it's been
Thanks, man.
it's inspirational for me. So I'm 6 months into quitting my job, and I feel like I mostly hide that from other people at this phase. I'm curious, what did it feel like when you started sharing your journey publicly?
Oh God, I was so ashamed at the beginning. I really hid from the world, and like part of moving to Asia, I think, was hiding even more, and like hiding in a way that felt good. I had some really hard comments from people I cared about, and it really rattled me, and I didn't have enough friends supporting me at the time. And one of my friends said that your first book was kind of like writing a permission slip to yourself. And I think a lot of my writing early on was about that. Is like saying, you're actually okay, Paul. And I think that's what people feel when they read the book. And yeah, that's a big driver for me. But yeah, that's real. It's hard because the world demands you have a plan in a story. So yeah, it's about like finding the others who are like in this room, like seem comfortable sharing that here 6 months. So hell yeah. And the thing is, like, I've watched so many people on paths, people find shit to care about. And like, this is a room of highly ambitious people. Like, that drive to do things you care about doesn't go away. Now, that drive may not produce a impressive exit or a high 6-figure tech salary, but it will lead you to do impressive shit. And if you follow that and like trust it, I think it can lead to stuff. Like, there's so many capable people. Like, you're capable, and like, just trust that and see where it takes you. You will land on stuff that does resolve some of that shame.
I'll just plug, when I was on sabbatical, I was at the Commons, and we joke that at any given time, there's about 40% of people that are not W-2 employees. And so being around people who are also just like wandering, pathless, was like deeply healing for me, because it was not like, hey, how's work? Like people are like, what are you doing this week? You know, we like had a sabbatical circle. People come and did projects that they were like giving themselves permission to do for the first time since they were kids. And so, you know, I think whether it's finding a group of friends or like finding places like this to find people who are doing the same thing, I think that's probably like the single biggest accelerator to like doing the work, the inner work, and then reflecting it back to an external audience of like, okay, I'm growing alongside these people. Like doing it by yourself is just demoralizing. And you're always gonna have, I think, like an inner critic that's asking you why you're doing this. But oftentimes actually looking at friends who are doing crazy shit, you're like, oh, okay, there's like some other person out there doing it. And I think it makes it so much easier to stomach some of the like, you know, the chaos of feeling like being lost and just feeling like you have somebody on the path with you.
Do you have pathless friends?
Not really.
Okay. What kind of friends do you want to meet?
Like, I have like crazy ultra runner, like pathless friends.
Nice.
Those are good people.
Trail running friends.
Yeah.
Who needs more pathless friends? All right. Look at this. This is great. So you find each other, like wander. It's almost like too cozy here. After we're done, we're gonna like mix up, find at least like one other person that's looking for pathless friends and just like hang out.
And we can.
This is my like ultimate dream. I don't care about like book sales I just want like more pathless people to hang out with.
We can also share maybe a form if folks are interested in sharing their information and their interests. We are happy to pull together something where you can connect with people that you share interests with.
Pathless Anonymous.
Was it missed opportunity? It's a lost connection. Pathless edition. You want to do a couple more questions? What do you think?
Yeah, we'll do one more question, and then we have a breakout activity for you guys to share a bit. I'll roam around. I'll sign any books. You can just like shove it in my face. I'll sign it, and yeah, I'll stick around for a while. Love talking about this stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, so I've been, like, I guess my path after leaving very stressful startup and corporate job, strategy and operations, and I found a hobby that I really loved. String training, and I kind of turned it into making money, but it's like a baby and I can't really rely on the baby. I'm trying to figure out how do I get the good enough work to like sustain me so that I could do more of the work that I like, but I don't want to do too much. Like I don't want to train 30 clients a week. But at the same time, I'm like, to your point about reintegrating that part of your life, like that used to like give me so much, it would trigger me so much, doing strategy and ops work. And so I'm kind of curious, how did you experiment with like doing the work you really like, but also getting that good enough, working on that part too, like building that business up so that you could, you know, take care of yourself and like, kind of live.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it in a place like SF, to be honest. It's like I didn't make more than 40 grand for like my first 4 years after quitting my job. And so I was living pretty scrappy. So I think like just questioning like, okay, what am I trying to make and like what might make that easier? But also working backward really helps. Is like, okay, if I have to make like 30 grand, what are the ways to make money that feel good? So one of the exercises me and my wife did a few years ago is we listed out 100 ways we could make money. And it was really just an imagination expansion activity. And we came up with like all these crazy things. And like some of them were worth trying, but also just realizing there are ways to make money. Like maybe a part-time gig, 5 hours a week sounds good. Or like maybe you do a training package that you'd be like a hell yes to, but you only do it selectively and charge a lot of money. Like you can charge these tech companies a lot of money. You could do like they pay so much. It's so crazy. I have like all industrial clients, but yeah, just come up with like a $15,000 training. Like, so I price really high for my training and corporate work. If I'm gonna spend time with corporate, like we're securing the bag to do the good work. These companies are so profitable in the tech industry. You're in SF. So just like come up with a crazy idea of like, what is the crazy bold thing that would make 20 grand? And I can do like 2 a year and I work backward from there. But yeah, I don't know, some ideas. But offer to anyone, if you email me at paul@pathlesspath.com, I will answer all remaining questions in either a newsletter or a blog post, and I'll email it to you.
Want to do the breakout?
Cool. Yeah, so we're going to do a fun little activity now. We're going to break into groups of like 3 to 5, I think, and we'll do this for about 20 minutes. And so one of the questions in my book, what page is this? Let's see. It's a question your work scripts. Chapter
7, 90, 98.
90. Yeah, so page 100. So go around in your group and just talk about the work scripts you grew up with. I find this fascinating because these are so deeply embedded in like how we see the world, and often like in our lives we need to sort of evolve or remix these scripts. So just talk about the scripts you grew up with. Talk about the phrases your parents would say or you absorbed from the culture. Example from mine was like, well, work sucks, you gotta work. Angie's phrase was like, we're not the kind of people that make money, so you gotta learn to like put your head down and work hard. Talk about the scripts. People usually love talking about this. Talk about it in your group. And just like go around the table quick, like the group's quick, like 1 to 2 minutes per person, and just like reflect back on what people are hearing and see where the combo goes. So do that for 20 minutes, and then we can sort of like drift into like a larger group thing. Mingle, like a lot of people here looks like they need like pathless friends. I can't be friends with everyone, especially like I spend most of my time with my daughter now. But yeah, let's meet each other and start a slow revolution.
Woo!